we talking about again?
Yeah.
Where does mental illness come from? Go. Zach.
There's just different answers. One is in the category where it's a genuine disability. It's a genuine sign of lack. Or literally you get brain damage. Or you're born with brain damage. Yeah,
a lot of people think it is a physical. A lot of people would beg to differ that it's a mental thing. They would say that it's a biochemical phenomenon.
The other is that it's actually it has a purpose of function. It is a normal thrust from the unconscious that is trying to correct the ego.
Yeah.
Well, in other words, it's not an illness. It's literally just...
It's useful. We can't ignore the fact that it's useful. As I was thinking about this, bipolar thing is one of the rare mental illnesses that's, first of all, it's not... A lot of people function with bipolar disorder. A lot of brilliant people have it or had it. It's not like, say, schizophrenia or like really, really severe depression where, it's harder to identify the utility in something like that. Whereas like with a bipolar, there's a lot of, creative energy flowing out of them, and that can be put to use,
Yeah, there's definitely really effective schizophrenic people who aren't, I guess maybe when you're schizophrenic, you're not, there's sort of like, you have a phase where you're schizophrenic, but even a lot of people who are schizophrenic, there's a guy named Will Hall who's also associated with the Icarus Project, and he does a thing called Madness Radio, and his only diagnosis was schizophrenia, and he's clearly high functioning if you listen to his show. I mean, he's interviewed like boatloads of people who've all had different situations in the mental health world, or with as far as mental illness. So then there's the whole question: well, what's even the difference between schizophrenia and bipolar? And I don't even know.
I mean, you could give there's a textbook definition of each of them.
Yeah, but the textbook definition.
I know, but it's still useful. And if your question is to start to understand the difference,
But and then there's that in between of schizoaffective, which is the part bipolar, part schizophrenic.
I honestly, yeah, like, I don't even care about the medical distinction between, as I don't have much faith in the mental health system anyway, so if you're bipolar, schizophrenic, or just major depressive, to me, I don't care, because the simple fact is if I'm supposed to treat you, if I'm supposed to help you, I have to listen to you, and I have to get inside your head, and those categories aren't going to help me.
It's useful though to have categories to split things up.
Yeah,
you could categorize, like, basically mental illness is the art of categorizing symptoms, but the other thing you could do is categorize causes. So what I'm really kind of interested in is whether or not certain forms of trauma, or maybe not trauma, but certain parts of a person lead to specific illnesses, specific, what are we going to call them? Bunnies?
Conditions?
Can we go bunny rabbits? Situations.
Divergences.
Divergences.
But I don't even want to use it like necessarily euphemisms like that. Like, why not? I mean, call it a mental illness.
Yeah.
But if you're going to call it a mental illness, I think you have to differentiate between those that are genetic and those that are acquired. Vis-a-vis trauma or anything else.
Well, and amongst those that are acquired, you have to differentiate between physical acquisition, such as brain damage.
I would not put brain damage in the category of mental illness.
Oh, okay.
At all.
But in theory, there's no reason.
No, it would be mental...
That's neurological...
trauma, I mean...
literal neurological trauma.
Yeah.
But to me, that's sort of the same category as somebody who's just born...
Well, what about...
You might see physical manifestation, or, you might see the same behavioral manifestations in a individual with a brain injury as you might see with somebody with a mental illness, but they're not the same.
No, they are the same.
They're totally not the same.
No, they are.
Like, where it's coming from is not the same. The function of the behavior might be the same.
Well, you've just lived with it your entire life, in the case of you're born with it, or it's a genetic characteristic, whereas if you get brain damage, now you have it. But in terms of the actual nature of it, it's a physical situation, that you have.
I don't know. I'm going to have to agree with Justine on this one.
That's the one category of mental illness. To me, the other category is natural human responses.
The only reason I agree with Justine on this is because I think actually one of the things that makes mental illness its own industry is that it's really hard to pinpoint where it comes from. Right? I think basically the entire mental health care profession and all the literature about it is an attempt to figure out where it comes from. And you don't need to do that with a traumatic brain injury. And the other example I had was mental retardation, which is, personally, I think it's pretty easy to distinguish between mental retardation and a mental illness.
What if you have both, though?
Dual diagnosis.
Mental retardation and mental illness.
But I think the point is that there's no. I mean, maybe we're going to find a genetic cause of mental illness, but I mean, we haven't yet.
Right.
And there's brain chemistry that goes along with it.
Look at your own family, though. I mean, was there any history for you? Was there any history?
Yeah, my father had.
I don't know. See, I don't have a problem because in Jungian psychology, you have something called the unconscious, which provides all you need in terms of meaning and purpose and depth and actual purpose to a mental illness. And so if somebody has a physiological situation that means like they can't do math or something, that's like, in a way, here's the thing. Somebody who's born with a situation or gets into it with an accident, if they start getting depression, well, maybe it's because their ego is responding to their life, even though their life is actually the situation they have in their brain. So in a way, the depression is not the illness, is my main point. The depression is not the illness. The depression is a response to a situation in life that they are living. Maybe they feel divergent, maybe they feel just like they can't do anything, they're ineffective. And so generally I've never met a case of depression that I wasn't like, oh, I get it. I understand why you're depressed. Like I've never met depression as an illness. I've never encountered it ever in my life.
That seems absurd. You personally, what you're saying is that you personally haven't.
Yeah, I've never met in either me or anyone else a situation where depression was a genuine illness, where depression wasn't just a natural human response to the life that they have.
I mean, you could say that about any disease, though.
No, you can't. Like cancer is not a natural response to your life.
Well, maybe this is a topic for a different night, but I would. But
no disease. I mean, generally disease.
I just think it's harder. I think it's harder than you're making it seem to draw such a strict line between a physical illness and a mental illness. There's plenty of people out there who suggest that mental illness is actually physiological, purely.
I'm telling you that you say, oh, depression is hereditary. Well, maybe the hereditary thing is sort of a psychological condition that makes it hard for you to get along with people, or makes it hard for you to do something that other people are really good at. And being bad at that makes you depressed. But I've never not been able to find a reason for the person to be depressed. I've never listened to their story and not been like, oh, I get it. I understand what would cause you. So,
do you think that you've ever experienced depression?
Yeah, I mean, when I was 15, from 15 to like, I guess my first manic episode, that was my like diagnosis. I was depressed. But then they moved me up to like bipolar 2. They keep bumping me up because I kept exhibiting, confidence as opposed to subduedness. But my depression in the end was a human reaction to my life. And
I don't know. I'm not even sure why I'm inclined to disagree. What do you think, Justine?
I disagree, but I understand the idea that it is a natural response. And at what point do we pathologize it and say that it's depression and not just sadness and just like, purely regular triggered sadness from sad things happening? And it would be at the point where things, like the person can recognize that everything else is fine and I just can't like snap out of it. Things are going a whole lot better. My life isn't crap anymore. Things have improved. I can recognize this. I like my friends. I have these activities, I still have a job. Why do I still feel like crap?
Well, because you have because nobody's acknowledging your depth. You have a depth that, despite the external appearances, you may have all these friends, or you may have all the things that, from the external world, are thought of as the things that avoid depression, but you may have a depth to your character. You may have an inner divergence. You may have, patterns of thought that you habitually have where you have no one to connect with.
Including they yourself, embrace it? I guess is what you're saying.
Yeah,
I think I know what Zach's saying. It's basically you feel something going on inside of you. That's not the depression. There's something really sort of ambiguous going on inside of you, and nobody around you can acknowledge. Nobody can understand it, and neither can you. Right, and that's how I would start to define mental illness. It's where you start to lose touch with yourself, right?
Well, you could also be gaining touch with yourself. You could realize that this habit you have of thinking in a certain way, is actually of great value, and nobody around you is acknowledging it. And that's where you get your manic episode.
I guess so. Either way, I think it would be sort of a losing of oneself, either in the world, you're either going to go into the world and start to find all your meaning in others and in something that's not yourself, or you're going to go so deep within yourself that you're going to lose touch with the world. But one way or the other, I think it would be.
Well, it's extreme, but that's what makes it not.
No, but ideally you want somebody in the world who is basically cool, is the dude with your deep self. They're able to be yeah, I get it. I mean, I understand your real situation. Because to me, that's where depression comes from. It's from feeling like your real condition isn't being acknowledged. What's really going on with you is not you don't have any community with it, and you feel completely alone.
I don't know that. I mean, just
to me, it's not an illness.
Before, if you realize that, why isn't that enough? Why are people still depressed once they realize that there's something deeper within them?
Most depressions are not illnesses. They are natural reactions, and they have a cycle. They have a process. People get depressed, and then after a certain period of time, they come out of that depression. And I just never, in my life, encountered somebody who was depressed as an illness, as opposed to... Now, here's the thing. Life does suck for some people. There's some people who just get a shit
bad hand in life.
Yeah, bad hand. That's what I mean.
Are you making the point that every
that's
one
the
of
criminality of the medical health industry?
Are you saying that every mental illness is similar to this? That it's not actually a disease?
You're almost saying it's environmental.
No, I mean in particular depression, and that's the big one. But even mania is, as I said, I mean you're simply acknowledging some part of something in you that has gone unrecognized or unappreciated, and you are just spontaneously appreciating it on your own, but you don't really have that much guidance. You don't know how to go about it. You don't know how to go about beginning to appreciate that part of yourself that no one else is recognizing, and so you're stuck without a coach. You're stuck without any help.
I guess. I don't know. There's something about your explanation that's just not, it's not filling me up.
What would
you...
I mean, perhaps it's just we're coming from the prism of our own experience that makes it really difficult to kind of connect. It's this is what mental illness is because it's my own personal experience with it. But yeah, so I guess I'm not completely resonating with it as well. But I do understand a lot of what you're talking about, and that what people can say is a manic episode or a depressive episode could really just be a natural response to, the alignment of their life, and they're trying to realign it, subconsciously.
Yeah. And often they are divergent. I mean, the explanation in terms of, hereditary mental illness is that they inherited the same divergence that their parents had. Mm-hmm. And so they're experiencing the same natural reaction.
You're basically divorcing it from any sort of natural origin. Right?
I'm just saying there's a huge chunk of mental illness.
All nurture.
No, remember, I started by saying that there's conditions of the brain and brain damage and things like that. And I acknowledge those. I'm just saying a huge portion of, so this is, obviously this is new to you guys. But
well,
to me,
I just think there's more to it. You know, it's.
I don't know. I mean,
if I had to summarize your argument, it's basically that it's a person who doesn't understand themselves goes insane. And for me,
it's sort of my argument. Which is why Socrates, know thyself, all that, the unexamined
Socrates,
life, the examined life, the unexamined life, the whole idea of knowing yourself.
Before Justin, you said something that piqued my interest, which is we're all seeing things through our own prism. I think was your word, and that is sort of begins to define what a mental illness is. It's dealing with yourself in the world, and I use those words really carefully because I don't exactly believe in a self, and I think that the distinctions we draw are convenient, and I think that we get to a point where we realize that, and that's when mental illness sort of begins. It's when we start to realize the joke that's going on. What are you doing, Zach?
I don't know if the wobbling is going to affect the microphone or not.
No, I don't think it will.
Okay.
Audience, if you're bothered by the wobbling of my water...
The water wobble?
Write us a letter and tell us the wobbling of the water is wobblisome.
The wetter water wobble.
So anyway...
What was the question?
I think there's two important questions that we need to answer.
Survey says...
Okay, it's done. Okay, two questions. One is, where does mental illness come from? Two is, what do we do with it? What can we do, right? Because it's a problem. Can we all agree that it's a problem? Zach, I'm looking at you.
I mean, it's different. It's more than one problem.
I knew you weren't going to be able to give me a straight answer. Never given me a straight answer.
I mean, it's several problems, and there's different problems, and they have to be addressed differently.
Yeah, but the point is, we need to do something, right?
Ooh.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the Zach fence on this one.
Okay. let me explain myself.
Zach side of the fence.
Let me explain myself a little more. There's a call to action. The very fact that we're sitting here recording this.
Oh, okay.
There's a real thing that's out there in the world that we need to figure out. First of all, we haven't really figured it out yet. And second of all,
what do you think it is that the problem is?
So I think the very basic problem is that a lot of people suffer from mental illness.
Yes, and we started this podcast to alleviate the suffering of the world. Like Christ before us, we have arrived.
But what about people who don't suffer from it?
Right. Okay. So, that's why I always use my words very carefully. I always mean exactly what I'm saying, and then I also mean the exact opposite. So you'll get used to that after a while. Because this is a good thing to sort of acknowledge. Mental illness can be really useful, right? And bipolar's the perfect example of that, where it's like an explosion of creative energy that if you can hone it correctly, you can make brilliant art.
Yeah.
And if it weren't for whatever, irregardless of what's causing it, if it weren't for the situation itself, right, you wouldn't have Van Gogh, etc. Why?
And you have to take the down with the up, though. I mean, I think everybody embraces the manic energy and that, okay, all right, I'm not going to go fly off the handle and talk to God. Maybe I can just create some art instead. But learning that there are lessons to be learned from the low end, too.
I don't know. For me, self-knowledge. I'll just go back to self-knowledge.
Yeah.
I mean, some people can join, they just become a Christian or something.
Go on. Why are you stopping?
And in the Christian community, they find a community where, praising Jesus and having everybody else praise Jesus makes them feel like it converts them. You can have a conversion and it can cure your mental illness. And that's why people have religion, is because it cures their mental illness. Pretty much that's where religion comes from.
Do you think it cures it, though?
That's religion. In a nutshell, that's all, that's
the goal. It's the goal of religion, but does it work? I mean...
Well, if by definition, like when you were saying in the mental institution, that the idea of wellness is to conformity, then clearly a religious community would help you become well.
But I'm talking about religion where it's not at gunpoint. Not gunpoint religion. Because, honestly, we don't have that much gunpoint religion. We like to say we do, but people have a choice. I mean, yes, if you're growing up, if you're raised in a certain kind of family, it's gunpoint religion.
No, but I think Justine's point is that whether you go to it voluntarily or not, you're conforming, because the religion it's confirmation of the same thing over and over again, and so it introduces normalcy by habit. Because you go to church every Sunday, and you eat communion,
but I'm talking about
pray 5 times a day.
Yeah, but let's take what I would call real religion, where you convert. You literally have a religious experience, and you're a born-again Christian. Or religion, to me, is most manifest when you have a conversion. I became a Muslim. There's something there. And that's what I'm saying. It's curing your mental illness. Well,
here's another thing that's going to take us somewhere else. Can you really cure it? I mean, I would say that
I don't think. Yeah,
I don't really think you do.
My answer to that is that you have phases of life. It's like you have a little seed, and then it grows into a sapling, and then it grows into like a young plant, and then you grow into a mature plant. And so the way I look at religion is that it's really good for certain phases of the life of the plant. But there's a certain point at which it starts failing because the plant becomes too big for the religion. So that's the answer.
Did it answer my question? I don't know if it did.
Can you cure it?
As much of a difficult time as I have with the concept of mental illness, I think once you decide that there's a concept, you can't really cure it.
No, you can cure mental illness.
Okay. Tell me how. In 30 seconds.
It's not that hard. You just have to find the cause, and you have to form a relationship with the cause. Go to the source, Luke. What is the cause? Well, you have to figure it out. I mean, that's obviously...
You're no help at all.
Okay, what if my mental illness is caused by the fact that my grandfather had bipolar disorder, and maybe I was raised in a certain way that also contributed to me thinking a certain way? So can I cure it? Or is this just the way I am?
I guess, I don't know. I mean, some people have a tough row to hoe, right? So even if their mental illness is cured, their life is still going to be hard. And so they don't want to live a hard life. Well, then sometimes it's easier to fall back into a fantasy because life is so hard. So the harder your life is, the more tempting it will be to fall into an illusion about the truth.
I just think even with that example right there, we're always just dealing. Right? There's no curing. It's just, learning to deal with it.
Well, and there's multiple ways to deal with it. There's a way to, you take a lot of medication to numb your pain. You can go to church. I'm hitting the table. My thing that I advocate for is just embracing it, and just saying, all right, well, what's good about it? And what's bad about it that I can still embrace? What is just me? Can I embrace myself as a person because this is part of me?
Yeah, let's give this that.